Hello, welcome to the video. So I just figured I'd wrap up the series on what are the chances of Peter being Rome. So we've already covered Book of Romans in the previous video in the series. That Paul did not see that the apostles have already been to Rome, which explains why one of the reasons his desire wanted to be there so badly. We already covered there's expulsion of Jews in Rome. So when you're being told by Jesus, you will not make it through all the cities of Israel, you're not finished going through all the cities of Israel until coming Son of Man comes, then they would have just not gone to that city. It would have taken a lot more resources to find out in time, okay, who had gone back. But again, as I pointed out, Colossians 1:23, Paul said that God and preach to every creature in heaven. In order for him to know that, he would have been communicating with the apostles where they went to, where they're going. And so this suggests that the apostles had never gone to Rome or had any intention going to Rome except for Paul. And so that was written around 58 AD by some scholars. I believe it was written a little later than that, Book of Romans, around 63. But continuing on, what happened the last days of Peter? So 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 just helps us here. So Paul writing to the church of Thessalonica, which is right next to the 5 churches that Peter wrote to, okay, in 1 Peter. Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, by our gathering together unto him. So there's the gathering and the coming of the Lord Jesus. So right away, this throws a lot of people off. There's a Gentile interpretation, which suggests that it's just a bodily return to the earth. That is not how the Jews would have understood it. So if you want to understand how the Jews would have understood it, we go to, you'll have access to this in the description below. So here's the interactive PDF where it gave you the passage of the Old Testament, the Jewish understanding of coming in judgment. So basically, you have Isaiah 13, Jeremiah 51, Ezekiel 7, Malachi 4. I mean, you'll see all these. So this is the history of coming in judgment throughout the Old Testament. So when the Jews raised the question to Jesus, what's the sign of your coming? They had to go follow the chronology, what led up to that, how they understand it. Okay, and that's where we go back to the Old Testament, just what they meant by his coming. All right, so basically, it's where there's a judgment about to take place by God, who pours wrath on a nation. And when Jesus said, "Not one stone be left upon another," and they're thinking, okay, we have some history of this, Solomon Temple being destroyed and blah, blah. So it would have recollected their memory of coming and judgments. That's what it was referring to. This is not a bodily return to the earth. There's a couple passages where I could see where I used to believe the same thing, but as you look at it from the Jewish perspective, okay, I see it now, kind of thing. Okay, so that's what's going on here. So the sign occurred in the sky May 2nd of AD 66, and it lasted for 7 years during the Roman-Jewish War. All right, coming in judgment. All right, and they're gathering as well. Okay, actually, I need to pull up that the timeline. Let's see here. Let's see. Bear with me here. 70 weeks. There we go. Consummation. Okay, so yeah, so a sign occurred in the sky on May 2nd of 1866. And that's recorded right here, documented. You have access to this below. These are all interactive links. So source backing everything up. So the gathering lasted for 7 years. So this is when the stick of Joseph, the Jews have been scattered throughout the Roman Empire. They arrived first. They're the ones that prepared a place for the stick of Judah. Remember, Jesus in John 14 said, I will prepare a place for you. Remember, this is after he had already told them you could flee the mountains. So they fled the mountains right here. That's what this depicts right here. They fled to their gathering. That's the stick of Judah. So the stick of Joseph arrived first, preparing a place for them. So when the stick of Judah arrived in Petra, they would have had a place prepared for them. Okay. Now, why Petra? Because Petra fit the fulfillment of Revelation 12, where it had the history of the flooding and the earth split southwest of it. So if we go to here, Google Maps, you see Petra, okay, and there's the split, all right. So these are the key areas. 1 Peter 5:13. We'll get that in that later. But continuing on, okay, that no man deceive by any means that they should come. Now he's writing to the church of Thessalonica, okay, so there be a falling away first. That's the Jewish revolt, year 8066, the same year that the canon was closed, in the same year that the Jewish war started, and the same year the gathering started. There's a lot that happened in year 8066. The man is to be revealed, the son of perdition. Okay, that was, okay, so the son of perdition, who is he referring to? Perdition, the son of? That was Judas Iscariot. Okay, so Eleazar was the grandson of Judas Iscariot. Okay, he was the lawless one. All right, we'll get in that a little bit. Who posed himself above all that's called God, as worship. Okay, he was very arrogant, from what Josephus described. Says, sit in the temple of God. Basically, he was the governor of the temple. Okay. Remember you not, that was not, I told you these things, and now you know. Now, the fact I said, remember you not, suggests that it's a little bit more than 1 year from the time between the time First, Second Thessalonians written and Second Thessalonians written. It amazes me how scholars think that this is written 1 to 2 years after. It's just, and their reasoning. I lost all confidence in scholars, in the label of scholars, when I found that out. I have really on the dating of Second Thessalonians. It just stunned me. I'm sorry. Anyway, we're getting off track here. Know that we told they might be revealed in this time. The mystery already at work, so so they were alive at that time. Okay, only he's here, let's just go to. I'm not. I have a hard time getting used to 16th century English. Sorry. Oh my gosh. Okay. And you know what restrains him now. So the restrainer was his dad. That was the one. That was the son of Judas Iscariot. Eleazar was the grandson of Judas Iscariot. Okay. So his dad died on August 14th of 8066. On that same day, Eleazar, the lawless one, called the end of sacrifices for Caesar. Okay, that's the fulfillment of some passage in the Old Testament. Let's see here. We can pull that up. Where is it? Let's see here. Daniel 12:11. That's what it is. 12:11. Let's click on that for a second here. Yep, sacrifice should be taken away. The abomination that make a setup. Okay, 1,290 days. Okay, so that was August 14th. That was the day when the lawless one, Eleazar, put an end to sacrifice offering, and that was the final straw that caused the Jewish war, according to Josephus. Okay, so anyway, so taken out of the way. So he died that day, the restrainer, his dad. And that same day, he called in the sacrifice offering. Then the laws will be revealed from the Lord who will slay the breath of him. Now this should be lowercase h. This is the Lord does not operate under the power of Satan people. It's just stunning how the people who translate could come up with capitalizing the H. This is lowercase h, referring to the lawless one's mouth. Wow. Like, wow. It just, I'm sorry. Anyway, moving on. So in AD 73, if you go to the timeline here, the lawless one, that's just dashed red here. So he had the 1290 days. Okay, he was governor of the temple, and at that point, after that, the lawless one fled the temple. Okay, and he went to the Masada. You just follow the dashed line. He went to the Masada, and there he gave a speech by the breath of his mouth. Go back to here, the breath of his mouth. Here, just go back to the translation that has it translate correctly. Um, Lowercase h. That's the way it should be. So he gave a speech, and it resulted in a suicide, mass suicide. And they basically lit themselves on fire. This was in April of AD 73. This is the last of Israel's enemies destroyed. Okay, even him who coming after the work of after the working state will all power signs of wonder. Okay, now see, yeah, so see how lowercase here, that's referring to lawless one. Let's just go back to the New American Standard here for a second here. Let's see what they did. Okay, so they used the word the one, the phrase the one, instead of lowercase he. It's their way of getting around it when they're caught uppercase in here, they try to get around to here. Anyway, gotta love these translators, how they get around these things. But anyway, so, and there was all exception wickedness for those who perished, because they did not receive the love of truth as to be saved. These were the last remaining Jews who rejected Christ. Again, they're the last of Israel's enemies. So they believe what is false, and they be judged. They lit themselves on fire. Okay, so continuing on, in verse 15, is their brethren, are referring to the church of Thessalonica, more particularly the Jews, okay, that came to Christ, stand firm and hold to the tradition which you were taught. Okay, now why would they need to be taught? These were Jews that they're adopted Greek culture, the Hellenistic Jews. They are not stick of Judah, they were the stick of Joseph. Okay, so the stick of Joseph was the Jews scattered throughout the Roman Empire, the adopted Greek culture. They were not the hardcore Jews in Jerusalem. The hardcore Jews in Jerusalem were the ones that decided canon, all that. Okay, so so they had to be taught the basic Jewish traditions. Okay, the oral and written tradition. That's oral right here. This is where there are two different types of oral traditions of the Jews. There was the oral tradition where the rabbi would repeat over and over the scriptures to his disciples over and over, because probably was very expensive back then, so it's just cheaper just to repeat over and over, get ingrained in their memories. And that explains why throughout the New Testament, when they just say a few words, they're able to recall what he's talking about in the Old Testament. They obviously have phenomenal memories. So that's one form of oral tradition by mouth. The other form was Jesus and then the apostles, original 12 apostles, oral, what Jesus shared with them orally, and then they share orally with the Jewish people. Okay, and so that was under apostles hearing what Jesus had to say and all that. So, or by letter from us. So the word us here is implying the apostle here. So what ended up happening? Peter wrote First Peter. That is the letter they were waiting for. Okay. And so you have to look at this from the Jewish perspective to be able to understand it. If you look at this from Gentile perspective, all bets are off and piecing all together. Okay. So First Peter, right away, the very first verse, an apostle of Jesus Christ, just strangers scattered. Strangers scattered. Now, you look at this from the Jewish perspective. They're the Jews that have been scattered throughout the Roman Empire. Okay, they're not gathered. It's what the opposite, gathered, scattered. Okay, strangers. Okay, throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. So what Peter doing? He's telling them it's time to go for the gathering. He had to do it in a very subtle way. He couldn't just tell them, hey guys, it's time to go for a gathering. That would risk anybody who read that letter would have could possibly have followed them to gather. They had to leave very quietly. Okay, so now where to? That's where First Peter chapter 5:13 comes in. Oops, trying to get rid of that. There we go. Verse 13. The church at Babylon, let together with you, salute you, and so does Marcus, my son. Now, Mark, here, let's just go to more sensible translation here. Okay. And so does my son Mark. Send you greetings. So does my son Mark. Okay. So they were to leave for Babylon. The question is, what's Babylon? Here's the problem. If you go to the timeline here, Babylon was renamed to Fortress of Babylon in the year 300. If you go to my timeline here, it was renamed to Babylon during the time Eusebius was trying to rewrite history. And if you read his books, Ecclesiastical History, he said, "Oh, Peter must have been using the metaphor here. Babylon must have been referring to Rome. That was his attempt trying to reverse the decline of Rome here. Okay, the decline of Rome. He's trying to change the center of theocracy from Jerusalem above, to Rome. Okay, and if you watch my video series on how easy it would have been for Eusebius to rewrite history, it was not that difficult. Way easier than a person originally thinks. But anyway, it was during this time that it was renamed. Okay, and so he was actually referring. He was named from Babylon to Fortress Babylon. This is what Peter was referring to. Okay, and Eusebius knew it, and he put a whole spin on it to try to revive Rome. So this is where Mark was. Remember, 1 Peter 5:13, Mark, greet Mark. So those 5 churches, let's go over there here. These 5 churches, they were to let Church Thessalonica know. You understand Jewish culture, and you understand they're waiting for the gathering. They're ready to go. They would have been communicating with each other behind the scenes, behind the Gentiles' backs. Okay? So they were left for the gather, greeted Mark, just like for Peter 5:13, and then continuing on by boat to where's the water channels? Well, anyway, there's numerous water channels that brings you there. I need to turn that later on. But anyway, there's a whole bunch of water channels that bring you down there where Peter would have been. And Peter would have escorted them to Petra, okay, for the gathering. So that is what was going on there in Peter's final days, okay? And the fact that he says that you're scattered suggests he was in or near Jerusalem at the time he wrote First Peter, okay? He was not in Rome, okay? So he would have had to identify the lawless one in Jerusalem, Eleazar, to know when to start writing First Peter. Remember, I said August 14th of 86, when the laws were revealed. It would have been immediately after that. He would have penned this down and get that letter out to him. It's time to go. If you watch my video, the math works. The amount of time it would take him to do that, the amount of time to communicate, the amount of time for him to get on a boat to go, remember they're ready to go. The math actually works. Okay? The timeline before they had to arrived to Petra. Okay, so anyway, that's where their gathering would have been. That's where, and that's where 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 16 would have been fulfilled. That's referring to the Jewish Yom Teruah, the shouting to the Lord and a trumpet. That is the Jewish Yom Teruah that Gentiles did not participate in. Okay, that is where that passage was fulfilled. A lot of people refer to rapture. So that would have happened on September 22nd, 8073. That is halfway through the last Yom Teruah. It's centered around the 40th anniversary of Christ's Passover. The time and half a time. They show in the timeline. Um, of Daniel 12:7. Okay, 4th anniversary, time, times, and half a time. And it worked out perfectly. It so happened worked out perfectly. It was the day they fled, Thursday afternoon, April 10th, 8070. That was Matthew 24. Jesus said, pray your flight not take place in the winter of the Sabbath. The prayer was answered. So they would have fled on that day. They would arrive in Petra. Now, this is the stick of Judah. The ones who are in Judah. I'm not talking about the stick of Joseph. Okay, that had already arrived there earlier on. Okay, so it worked out perfectly. The next day, they would arrive April 11th. You got the 1260 days. It brings you right to the halfway point of their last Yom Teruah. It matched perfectly. Okay, which is Tishri 5 of that year of 8073. Tishri is the Jewish calendar. So it worked perfectly. The times and half a time, and the 1260 days, Revelation 12:6. Bam! It comes to the exact same date. Okay, they match. So anyway, so that's what that's all about. All right. And then Peter writes in the second epistle. Now, I believe the first two chapters of Second Peter was one epistle, and Second Peter chapter 3 is another epistle. So if you just go to chapter 3, it starts off this second epistle. Okay, that is the second epistle that he's writing to the stick of Judah. So Second Peter are two different epistles written to the stick of Judah, Jews who are in Jerusalem. Okay, so let's go back to here. So knowing that, surely I'm going to put off this my tabernacle, even our Lord Jesus Christ showed me. So what Peter's saying here, I'm not going to live much longer. Now you have to understand with papyrus, it's expensive as heck, and you really have to plan and think through what you're going to write before you even write. This is not like paper, super cheap. You write something in error, and then you can throw it out and rewrite it or retype it, whatever, like we do today. It wasn't like that back then. They had to think through before everything, before they started penning down the first letter. Okay. Now, if you notice here, Peter does not say a word about succession of any kind. Of any kind. Because he was devoted to the house of Israel, who were in their final days. This whole Gentile perspective of Peter being a pope or a bishop of a certain area of Rome, and it's just totally fabricated by Eusebius. It's a major source of presupposition. But anyway, so he's not going to live much longer. And this was written in the year 8066. This is after he finished the mission of Matthew chapter 10, verse 23, where the sign occurred in the sky, right here, May 2nd, 8066. That's when that mission would have ended. But immediately after that, he would be after that he would have written his epistle. So I believe he wrote 2 Peter chapters 1 and 2 first, and then he wrote 1 Peter. To okay, for 2 Peter 1 through 2 was to the stick of Judah. Okay, 1 Peter to the stick of Joseph, hinting to them it's time to go. And 2 Peter chapter 3 was his last letter to the stick of Judah, and basically telling him it's going to happen. Christ's coming. Just be patient. It's going to happen. And so this would have been written after the sign occurred in the sky. So Peter would have had all the confidence in the world. As he wrote to them, it's going to take place. And again, this all had to be subtle. Okay, this had to be. This was the Jewish people. They're gathering their final days. Okay, so I mentioned last days throughout the New Testament. It's referring. Some people say last days the Old Covenant order. There's some truth to that, but more specifically, the last days of the house of Israel. Okay, so anyways, we covered all that. So Peter, in 8066, recognized not going to live much longer. So he would have escorted them by September 11th of 8066. That was the date they came up with based on the time and a half a time of Revelation 12:14. Okay. And it goes reversed from Christ's Passover. Okay. Goes in reversed order. Okay, so you got Daniel 12:7, time and a half time going this way of the timeline, and Revelation 12:14 going reverse. Okay, to get to September 11th, all right, of AD 66. That was the half a time of their Yom Teruah, or also referred to the Feast of Trumpets. Okay, and the timeline worked perfectly. There's an article on Petra, how long it would have taken them um, to do the work they did. They came up with 3 years. 3 years fits within the 3.5 years nicely. So no issues there. So anyway, so that's what would have happened during Peter's last day. He would have escorted a stick of Joseph here, and then he would have died shortly after that. I believe it was in the hands of Roman, would have been in the hands of Roman army, as he was trying to feed the house of Israel. Remember John 21, feed my sheep. That's both physical and spiritual. And knowing that with Titus, anyway, he wanted to take advantage of famine that's going on, and he surrounded Jerusalem with his army at that point. And so, if Peter had been trying to continue to feed them, remember he finished his mission by this point, Matthew 10:23. Okay, he was done going through all the cities of Israel at that point. Okay, Matthew 10:23. So he would have been focusing just on that area at that point once he finished. And like I showed you earlier, to suggest that he would enter near Jerusalem at this point. So that he was focusing on the stick of Judah. This letter is focused on the stick of Joseph, okay? But this tells you where he was at. He had been in Jerusalem, since the center of theocracy was Jerusalem, the Jewish people, where the temple was. Okay. And so this suggests Peter was in or near Jerusalem. Okay. And he actually living in Babylon, which makes sense because that would have allowed him to be able to feed them, going back and forth between family and the Jewish people. So was it boat, being able to go fishing, feed them, going back here, family, feed them, stay with the family for a while, going back and forth, okay? Being a shepherd, John 21, just like Jesus asked him to, okay? So it had been after September 11th, AD 66, where Jesus had already escorted them, mission finished. By that point, Titus had the army surrounded the temple. Can't feed them anymore. At that point, Peter fulfilled his purpose. He fulfilled everything he had done for the house of Israel. Okay. Now remember, in Galatians chapter 2, verses 7 to 12, he had withdrawn from the Gentiles. That was referring to what happened in Acts chapter 10. If you look at Acts chapter 11, first couple of verses, he's already getting resistance from the Jews. That connects to Galatians chapter 2, verses 7 to 12, what Paul said that due to the resistance of the Jews, he didn't quite word it that way, but that's the point he's making, that he withdrew from the Gentiles. And that was right after Acts chapter 10. So he did not focus on Gentiles from that point forward. Even there's no reckoning way in the Gentiles coming to him. Now, if Gentiles come to him, he has to, according to law, go forward with it, which happened in Acts chapter 10 with Cornelius' household, where Cornelius asked by the Lord to send messengers out to Peter. Note the direction. Okay, Peter was not going out to Gentiles. It was the reverse direction in Acts chapter 10. And then he preached the gospel to them. And so that was very significant because that was actually the last day of Daniel's 70th week. Very significant. So anyway, so then Peter would have died. He probably been trying to feed them, violating Titus, and then he would have been burned in Gehenna, which is the valley south of Jerusalem. That's most likely how he died. Okay. Do we have proof of that? But no, but just using logic, piecing all this together, knowing the wartime was going on, knowing that Peter was doing his work in Jerusalem. Again, unfortunately, what has fooled a lot of people, the renaming of Babylon, fortress of Babylon to Fortress of Babylon. And so they think 1 Peter 5:13, they don't associate with this. But again, if you go to the timeline, It was renamed here. It was renamed after Eusebius had already began work in ecclesiastical history, which is an attempt to rewrite Jewish history. Is it any coincidence that within 10 years it was renamed? No. Did Eusebius have something to do with it? You bet. He was the spiritual advisor to Constantine, the emperor at the time, and being a spiritual advisor who'd been able to have, when you have relations like that, you'd be able to rename it. And then that allowed Eusebius to, in his writing, when he said Babylon, he was referring to Rome. And that was all an attempt to reverse the decline of the Roman Empire, which he succeeded by the end of his life. So, yeah, just so happens the timing just coincides with the end of Constantine's reign, and not too far from the end of Eusebius' life. So happened the decline was reversed when by the time the time those two had passed away. So it's all due to their efforts of rewriting church history, which again is not that difficult. And that's another obstacle people have a hard time overcoming. Like the 21st century mindset, it's so right away, first that history rewritten in the first century, they just go out and do something else. They have no interest in learning more. And I understand where they're coming from, but I have studied the first century, asked that question, and oh my gosh, it was way easier than I thought. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Okay. So anyway, that wraps it up. The likelihood of Peter ending up in Rome was pretty much zero. Again, he would have died right here. And when they find out somebody's trying to feed them, when they're trying to block, when they completely surround the army, and they were trying to take advantage of famine, Titus and the army trying to take advantage of famine to speed up the process of being able to destroy the temple. He did it in 5 months, where Vespasian tried for about 31 months or 37 months. They just kind of came and go. Wasn't really pushed hard, but Titus, he really ramped it up. I think probably because he wanted to get back home to Rome. He wanted to probably impress his dad too, who's the previous general who was launching against the temple. So anyway, yeah. So unfortunately, history. A lot of history destroyed. That's why we have to piece this together to figure out what happened. Like I said, right here, this is a period of time when the scroll burnings were taking place by the church and state. Okay, we call them books. They were scrolled back then. Books really didn't come about until later. So, yeah, and the timing that the burning took place is after Peter Fake Cemetery built, and the rewriting history taking place, the renaming of Babylon. I mean, and plus his works, after history that I show you over and over. Whoever wrote this book, most likely Eusebius, their attempt to rewrite history. So anyway, again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Okay, that's what's so fascinating about all this, because right away it turns out a whole bunch of people keep looking into this. Once they find out that a person says, "Oh, they're the rewriting history that took place," like, go away, you know. Again, I understand where they're coming from, but they haven't. It's just 21st century mindset running it. So there you have it. So the likelihood Peter ever steps foot in Rome, pretty much zero. And then she watched my videos on Eusebius. He basically tried to rewrite history, tried to use Peter, the marketing piece, to help revive Rome, and he succeeded. So that's that. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for watching this long video, and you have an awesome day.